All right, guys, good morning. Welcome to our men's breakfast. We're glad that you are here this morning. I know for some of you, this is your first breakfast. For some of you, you've made most of them. And for everybody in between, we're glad you're here. We do this the first Friday of every month, kind of and track along with the school from September through May. And so, welcome. We think this is an important time for us to gather together because I probably recognize, just like you do, that there aren't many spaces in our lives where it is easy or natural for us as men of faith to talk about both those things, the challenges and the struggles of being a man and also a person of faith, and particularly the intersection of the two. And so we want to make sure that we have time together as a community once a month where we can gather together, where we can discuss things that are relevant and important to us to talk about, and also so that we can encourage one another. And so I commend you for being here and for prioritizing this. I know that there are other places and other things vying for your time, and so I'm glad that you've made the investment this morning to be here. We're going to start a new series that we'll be talking about all the way through the end of May, talking about 8 leadership lessons that every man needs. And the place that we're going to begin this morning is, I think, probably the most important leadership lesson that we're going to learn. Everything else is going to build on this. Because really the question that we're asking is, what does it look like to measure your life? Like if you were to measure your life at the end of your life, whenever that comes, hopefully many years from now, if you're going to measure your life and kind of the quality of it, the effectiveness of it, what would you kind of use as your criteria for determining, like, yeah, I had a good life, or no, I didn't have a good life? Or because I'm sure we all know people who, in hindsight, look back on their life and they're like, man, I accomplished a lot. I built a business, I built an empire, I made a lot of money, but, right? And that but comes in, and there's this category of their life that maybe they didn't manage well. Maybe it was their family. They kind of sacrificed their family or their relationship with their kids or their significant other on the altar of success. Or maybe, they pushed and pushed and pushed in their business, but, they lost their health along the way. Right? We all have these people that we know of that hopefully we're wise enough to maybe make different choices and to measure the effectiveness of our life differently. But ultimately, I would contend that the true measure of our life is by the effect that we have on other people. I think if you look at any life well lived, any funeral eulogy that you sit through, the ones that seem to have lived well, the lives that we still talk about, the lives that we still remember, are the ones who've had an effect on us, who've influenced us and impacted us in a significant way. And ultimately, that's what we're talking about for the next 8 months, is this idea of influence, because I think that's the best definition for leadership. And I think it's unfortunate the way that the word influence has been co-opted by this idea of social media influencers, because I think it cheapens it. But really, it's how have we impacted other people's lives? I think that's influence, the impact that you have on someone else. We probably all have a friend or a parent or a mentor who has impacted us profoundly. That's influence. That's leadership. And so what we're going to be talking about for the next 8 months is, what are the lessons that we need to learn around leadership so that our lives can be influential and so that we can impact the lives of other people, and ultimately so that one day when our life gets measured, it's a life well lived. And so the first lesson that we have to talk about is the idea that the toughest person that you will ever lead is yourself. Now, some of us, when we think of leadership, we think of status, we think of title, we think of position, we think of corner office. But ultimately, if leadership is the idea of influence, then it all starts at home, and it all starts with yourself. Because you've likely seen someone who had all of the title and all of the authority and all of the power, and they had zero credibility because you observed that they didn't lead themselves well, right? They talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. And so how is it that we can be people who lead ourselves well? I think ultimately it's a different definition for the Christian life. As we follow Christ, our lives begin to take the shape of Christ. And what we'll see, I think, is it tracks along with how we as people can lead ourselves well. And I think the best place to start to look at this is Scripture. In particular, there's a letter that Paul wrote to an apprentice of his. So Paul's kind of pouring out fatherly wisdom to an apprentice named Timothy. And Timothy's about to go off and kind of follow in Paul's footsteps and begin to plant churches and to lead organizations. And he wants to give Timothy some wisdom so that Timothy can do this job well, so that Timothy can become a great leader and be effective in his ministry. And in the 4th chapter of Paul's letter to Timothy, he writes a little bit that I think summarizes so much of what we need to learn if we're going to try to understand what it means to lead ourselves well. This is what Paul says in the 4th chapter to Timothy. He says, "Set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. Do not neglect your gift. Be diligent in these matters. Give yourself wholly to them so that everyone may see your progress." And then look at the way that Paul ends this section of advice. He says, "Watch your life and doctrine closely." Watch your life and doctrine closely. Persevere in them, because if you do, you will save both yourself and your hearers. In other words, you must learn to lead yourself before you can lead anyone else. We have value here at the church. We have 7 of them, but one of them is you can only lead someone in the direction you yourself are going. This is the same message that Paul is giving to Timothy. He's like, you have to watch your life and your doctrine closely. The ways that you live, the actions that you take, the truths that you live out in your life, because that's going to inform your ability to lead anyone else. It all starts at home. And so in this little discourse that Paul gives to Timothy, I think there's a couple of lessons that are important for us to take away. And I want to move kind of quickly through them so that y'all have lots of time to talk about them at your table. Here's the first, I think, of 3 lessons in self-leadership. The first one is character leads first. This is what Paul says to Timothy. He says, set an example in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. What Paul's telling Timothy is that what you say you believe only matters insofar as how you live out your beliefs. In the church world, it's really, really unfortunate and common, though, that we have pastors who build these really successful ministries. They grow these large churches, and then towards the end of their career, inevitably, some of them, because of their inability to lead themselves well, and because of some flaw or weakness or corruption in their character, they ultimately end their ministry careers because of scandal. And I'm sure that there are parallels across your industries and places of work. People who, you know that they've been really successful and accomplished in what they're doing. They've got a lot of employees, or they've built a big, business or a book of business, and they're just people of low character or weak character, and so they don't carry the same respect that maybe you would assume that they would on surface, because when you get to know them, you realize like, oh, there's actually not much there worth following because of the character of their heart. And this is what Paul is trying to get Timothy to understand. And what I think we need to understand is, I think the truest measure of our lives is the way that we lead ourselves and the character of our life. I have this goal. I don't have a lot of goals in my life, but one of the goals in my life is that at the end of my life, after I'm dead, that the people who know me best will think highest of me. It's so often the case that as a pastor, I get to preside over funerals, and you hear all of these people who are on the periphery of a person's life speaking so highly of a person. And then as you get closer and closer and closer in intimacy and knowledge of a person, the people seem to have less to say about how great they were, or how important they were, or how impactful or influential this person was to them. And I was like, well, God, may that never be the case with me. May the people who know me best have the highest opinion of me. And I think ultimately that comes down to the character that we keep. Here's the question that I think we have to ask as it relates to our character. Are my words and my actions, are they worth following? Does the way that my life speaks, not just in the things that I say are important, but when you evaluate my words and my actions, are they worth repeating? Are they worth emulating? Second lesson I think that we have to learn in self-leadership is that calling must be stewarded. And this word calling, I think it can mean a lot of different things. I think it's rarely the case that there's a moment when the clouds part and a bright light shines down upon you and you hear this audible voice from God saying, Jim, fill in the blank, go do this. I don't think that seems to be the case with how God works in our lives. But I do think that the calling that we have before us starts at home. Who are the people in your life that you've been given responsibility over? A spouse, a children, your immediate family, your extended family. I think our responsibility to those people is first and foremost some of our highest callings. It's not your career. It is not your business. It is not the organization that you're leading or that you're trying to build. It's ultimately your family. I think that should be our first and highest calling. And then there are other places where we can pour and invest our energies into. But we have to make sure that we major in the majors, right? Sometimes it's easy as men to major in the minors because we are really successful at work. We're really good at our job. And then we come home and it's not as clear how to be successful, or the people don't follow our orders the way that they do at work when a salary is on the line, right? And so then we start to spend more time at work because we have more kind of feedback and reward based on how good we are, and then at home we neglect because it's not working the way that we want, right? May our calling at home be the most important thing and be stewarded well. This is what Paul says to Timothy. He says, do not neglect your gift, which was given you. This idea of gift and giftings is really just your energies. Some of us, maybe we have certain talents in one area or another, but ultimately it's the question of what are you doing with what you've been given? How are you stewarding both your talents and your resources, but ultimately the relationships that have been placed before your life? And so the question that I think should frame this second lesson is, am I actively using my gifts, or am I letting them sit idle? Am I investing my energies in the things that God has given me to be responsible for, or am I being passive? Am I being a little negligent or a little lazy with it? I think that's one of the things that as men that we have to reclaim is our commitment to being proactive. I think so often it's the case that we sit back, and maybe our wife will take care of it, or maybe somebody else at work will take care of it. But like, what does it look like as men to lead proactively, to step up, to shoulder the heaviest burden, to take the worst, job responsibility so that others can flourish? How do we lay our lives down on the line for the people around us? Ultimately, that's another way that our leadership mirrors the example of Christ, is how do we sacrifice ourselves for those around us? And then here's the last of the three parts of these lessons in self-leadership, is consistency creates influence. It is one thing to be a person of high character once. It is another thing to be a person of high character and high integrity in every moment and in every situation, all of the time. What Paul says to Timothy is, he says, be diligent in these matters. Give yourself fully to them so that everyone may see your progress. And I think it's important to note that Paul doesn't say so that everyone may see your perfection. Leadership is not about getting it right all the time. Leadership is not about having all of the answers, being the smartest in the room, always knowing which decision to make. But leadership is the commitment to diligence. It's the commitment to saying, I'm not going to give up. We're going to keep trying, to admitting the places where we fall short, admitting to the places where we didn't get it right or we messed up, or I'd like another shot at that, or hey, I need to follow up with you because that conversation didn't go the way that I wanted it to, and so I need to apologize for my part in this. Right? It's the commitment to getting better incrementally over and over and over again. I think that the most impressive lives are the ones who never gave in when it was easy, the ones who always made the hard choice, the ones who always made the better choice, not in terms of right or wrong, but in terms of it's one thing to cut corners when nobody's looking. It's one thing to be one way in public and another way in private. But the people who are unbelievably consistent in every room that they walk in, with every relationship that they have, those are the people that I'm most impressed by. Those are the ones that I'm like, that is a leader that I want to follow. Because whether we realize it or not, the people in our lives are watching us. And so if you lead well at work and then you come home and you're a jerk to your spouse, if you've got kids, they're watching that. And they're learning that, one, this is the type of person that my father is, but two, this is acceptable. You don't have to treat the people in your home well. It's okay as long as you've got a successful company or a good job or you make money, whatever. But what does it look like in every room to say, no, I'm going to be a person of integrity and character, and I'm going to be unbelievably consistent with the choices, with my actions, with my words. And so I think the last question that frames up this third and final kind of lesson in self-leadership is, can people see progress in my life? Is there some arc where I'm growing more like the example and image of Christ? Am I becoming kinder? Am I becoming more patient? Am I becoming more self-controlled? Are the fruits of the Spirit developing and producing in my life? That's the evidence that we are progressing, is that, oh man, I remember when you were 10 years ago or 20 years ago in your career, or 5 years ago, man, I've noticed a change in him, or God, he's so different than he used to be, right? Those are evidence of growth and of progress. Ultimately, the hardest person that we will ever lead is ourselves, because nobody lies to ourselves better than us. Nobody justifies, nobody excuse makes, nobody explains away bad behavior in our life better than we can. And so, ultimately, the question that we have to wrestle with is, how well are you leading you? I think when we lead ourselves well, leadership in every other area and arena of our life gets easier. But when we don't lead ourselves well, it is the place that will destruct the rest of our leadership. It doesn't matter how good you are in public or at your place of business or in your friend group. If you can't lead yourself well, ultimately it will detonate and have ripple effects across your life. Now, the difference between this idea and this charge to lead ourselves well as people of faith, and just if you came to a business talk, is that I'm not challenging you to go out and try harder. Because you can, and you might make some progress, but eventually you're going to stumble and fail. What I'm challenging you to do is to depend more on Jesus Christ, to recognize that there are limitations in our own abilities and our own efforts. The reason that we have issues in self-leadership is because we're all broken people, and we all need the grace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And when we depend on His strength, we don't have to be good enough. We don't have to be smart enough. We don't have to have high enough character to do it on our own. We depend on His strength and His wisdom in his character. And when we lean on Christ, when we put our trust in him and say, God, I'm struggling in this. Can you show me the way? God, I'm having a hard time navigating this situation at work or this relationship, or things feel tense at home. God, show me how to lead well in this. What in my life needs to be shifted and adjusted and conformed to your image? Because the more that we live like Jesus Christ, the more that self-leadership falls into place.